Here it is, one of the most underrated game consoles ever created, the SEGA Saturn, originally released in 1995 in the United States. This model was manufactured in June 1996. This is a wonderful video game console, and if you like the Sega Dreamcast or the Sega Genesis or the early PlayStation 1, the big gray one, the Sega Saturn is worth looking at. There's a ton of tremendous games out there. Most of them, in the United States market at least, don't cost all that much money. When you start getting into imports, like some of these games from Japan that have this kind of case design on them, then they're going to cost a couple bucks more. Sega top-down look here at the Saturn next to a typical American release. This is Darius Gaiden, which I've previously reviewed, and you can see it comes in this huge hulking case. This is what the Sega CD games also came in. Now the top of the unit here, this is an Action Replay 4-in-1 card. This does not come with the Sega Saturn. That you can buy separately. It allows me to play import games and acts as an additional memory card. The Saturn itself has some memory, not that much of it, so when you run out of room you can put it over here into one of these things. Also, it allows you to play import games. Many people know the Sega Saturn as an incredible 2D powerhouse for spaceship shooters, and unfortunately most of those games were not released in the United States but in Japan. You can pick those up in a standard CD case that looks like these. Now I got a lot of other games here that you can just get in for whatever reason, these promotional cases. Standard Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, the games that came out early on for the Saturn. It's a great console. You put your games in like that. See, we have Galactic Attack in there, another spaceship shooter. It's a hulking machine. It's very big, larger than the Sega Dreamcast. And power button there, reset button there. There's a couple different Sega Saturn controllers out there, and for a game console with a relatively short lifespan, it has a lot of controllers and accessories available for it. You plug those in the front here like this. It's a very beefy console. It's definitely one that you feel like you get your money's worth out of. It's solid, it's well built, typical of most Sega hardware, and has an internal power supply. We'll take a look at the back of the unit here. You can see the serial number and the model number back there. This is where the power supply, or the plug for the AC power goes, and that's your audio-video output. And there's a battery in there that acts as a battery backup for the clock and all that kind of stuff. Turn this around again. It's a great looking console too. In fact, this is one of the best looking game systems I can think of. And one nice touch about this is there's a little window you probably can't see right now, but you can see the game spinning in there when the system is powered up. Here's the Model 2 and the Model 1 Saturn controllers. These are some of the best game controllers that you can get for any system out there. I've previously reviewed these and I love them. And take a close look here at the open button. Like that, it says open. Very clear, very simple. Not a whole lot to break here. Unlike some of the newer consoles that have things that slide out, or you insert discs and they grip them and they slide in. You know what? I'd rather have this. That's not going to break on you. Or at least, if it does, it should be a hell of a lot easier to fix. Like any video game console, the Saturn has its strengths. I think its most powerful asset is in its ability to play some awesome 2D shooters and spaceship shooters like Darius Gaiden and Radiant Silvergun. Now some of those games, especially the Japanese ones, are going to cost you a couple bucks. You need something, whether it's this or another workaround, to play those Japanese games, but they're worth it if you like that style of game. Now there's a lot of American releases, Daytona USA, Virtua Fighter 2. Games like this are early examples of 3D polygon games, stuff that became popular back in the mid-90s with the Saturn and the PlayStation. And some of these look fairly crude by today's standards, but they're Sega arcade games and have a unique Sega style, so they're still a lot of fun, even if they look rather crude and rudimentary. There's also a random assortment of other video games that are available on PC and PlayStation from the mid-90s, like this one, Crusader No Remorse. A lot of fun. Your basic sports titles. I don't usually play very many of those. I think you buy a Saturn to play the Sega arcade games. You can get these really cheap today, or the import shooters. And these are just incredible video games. Most of these Japanese games can be found on places like eBay or PlayAsia.com, and when you actually play the game, if it's a shooter like this or this, there's some English text in there to help you out with the menus, so it's not like you need to read Japanese to play these things. A lot of fun. All you do is point at things that move and shoot them, or bomb them, or crash into them. When you buy a Saturn, make sure you buy it from somebody who can assure you that the thing works, or at least test it beforehand, since it has a CD optical drive in it. It has more parts to break than, say, an Atari 2600. It has standard audio-video cables that usually come with it. You want to make sure you get some of those. Composite cables. There's also an S-video cable you can get for this thing. It uses a fairly typical power cable, but try to get your power cable with it as well. Now, you know, on Classic Game Room, I love video games from all different game consoles, all different eras, new and old, Atari, Nintendo, ColecoVision, Sega, Sony, Xbox, you name it. Obviously, I have a soft spot for Sega, as many of you have noticed. I think that Sega, back when they were making hardware, built incredible game consoles and controllers, and of course I love many of their games, their Sega-specific games as well. And a little story here. A few months ago, I think I said something negative about a Nintendo game or controller or something. I mean, occasionally I'll be critical if a game or controller deserves it, whether it's Nintendo or Sega, doesn't matter. And I got a very simple email response back from an angry viewer that just said a couple words, and for once they were all properly spelled. It just said, "Fuck you, Sega fanboy." Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. Go buy a Sega Saturn.